Welcome to the Executive Outlook. In this episode of the Executive Outlook, we welcome Adam, a data strategy and analytics leader. He is also a founder and CEO of Datateer. Adam has spent years helping businesses simplifying data, build stronger analytic systems, and turn scattered information into clear business visually so that the business can actually see what is happening and where data can add the value. So his experience spans across data engineering, software development, cloud platforms, analytics, product strategy, and leadership. So very excited to have you, Adam, on the podcast today. We are going to discuss a lot of things. What's the mission behind it? How simplifying data can actually solve the problems of the business. So really happy to have this discussion today.
Yeah, thanks, Isha.
All right. So let's start from your journey. So how did it all begin for you? Because it's been a long time and now you're also owning your company. So how did it all started?
I've always been involved in software product development, sometimes very technical development roles, sometimes product management. And I've always enjoyed that. I got involved in data and I was working for some of the largest companies in the world and some of the largest institutional investors in the world. And they were putting a ton of money into building out systems like this to be data centric and have master data and good reporting and good analysis. And I thought it would be great if mid-sized companies could have this level of capability, but there's no way they have tens of millions of dollars to put into systems like that. So that was, long story short, the genesis of Datateer is, could we package some of this up so that it's not always a big project, but there's a platform and a service that just allows them to start using their data and maturing in the ways that they want to.
And how came across your company name? It's Datateer. So how you found this name and you thought that, okay, let's start a company with this name?
It was hours of searching for what .com was available. I wanted something with data in the name, something with that action oriented, and Datateer was it was a good option at the time, but it's really grown on me. I like it a lot.
Amazing. So when you started the company, so what was your vision with the company, that, okay, what you wanted to achieve? You mentioned that, okay, same level of exposure if the, middle-sized market, small and medium businesses can get, right, without putting a lot of budgets into the place, and they can be data driven. So how you help them by simplifying the process, and basically how it happened, and what's the mission behind it that you wanted to do this?
It was a little before the modern data stack concept was coined, and there was a bunch of investment in data tooling and things like that. And at that time, it was a very expensive proposition to say, we're going to have a data warehouse, or we're going to have good reporting, or anything data centric. It was just a ton of investment, and it took a long time. And then through the modern data stack, that became easier and faster to do, a lot more flexible, but not any cheaper necessarily, because now there were a ton of tools, and it actually slowed people down because there were so many options, and how do you integrate all of this stuff together? So we had all these capabilities, but it was still difficult. And now I think we're shifting even again, but it's still like a risky and difficult proposition. And one of the things that we do from the bottoms up is we don't step into a project where we're recommending technology. Our target market wants something that 80-90% is just going to work for them, and then the rest can be customized. So instead of saying, this is the data warehouse you should use, this is how you should ingest data, here's the products you need to buy, we just package all of that up. So we use good commercial tools and good open source projects, and we've integrated that into kind of a cohesive whole. And so from the bottoms up, we don't go in to implement anything. We just step in and we say, well, where is your data and what do you want to do with it? So that really accelerates and simplifies things, because they don't have to manage vendors. They don't have to make a bunch of technology or pricing decisions. Along with that, the pricing is a lot simpler. So from a top-down perspective, we charge on things that people can understand, non-technical people without a data background. They don't have to become an expert in this. So rather than talk about consumption credits and cloud spend and all of those kind of things, everything's bundled, and we just charge them on the number of data assets that we're managing for them. So the way we frame it, we build and manage data assets, and those assets might be extractions from source systems. They might be reporting models where we're shaping and calculating metrics in the warehouse. They might be dashboards or AI agents. Each of these is a distinct thing that has a price tag that a business stakeholder can understand, is there value in paying this much a month or a year for that particular asset or not? That's the only decision they have to make. So it's allowed us to step in really at a low price point for people that don't want to put a lot of investment in or haven't proven ROI yet. And they can get started on just a small number of data assets. As those prove valuable, they can decide how many more systems they want to integrate, if they want to start pushing data, if they want to involve more departments or more customer groups. And it just allows them to kind of right size from a business perspective what they want to put into an investment in data. The last piece that we did is very structured approach on the parts that need to be customized. So people's KPIs, even in the same industry, might be calculated differently. The way they want to visualize data or explore data might be different for them. So there's a certain level of customization that's always in place. And I think that's why a lot of companies do projects, because they feel like they have a custom situation and they have to build it all from scratch. But with this model, we've got the platform. And then from the top down, having very structured workshops and ways that we go about in gathering the information that we need has also been very helpful. So when we talk about we want a dashboard, there's a very structured way to get the information that out of the customer that they need. I think that's been also very helpful to simplify just this whole process, which can feel very big and very complicated.
So as per you, what are the different stages of data maturity within an organization?
I look at this very simply, Isha, because there are a lot of data maturity frameworks, maturity models, ways to be very deep in the weeds about what does it mean? Am I at level 1 or am I at level 2 or am I at level 3? The way I see it in these companies that are small or mid-sized kind of organizations or even small enterprises, they all follow a similar curve. And at the very beginning, there's nothing, but at some point, someone in the organization gets very proficient at pulling down like CSV files into a spreadsheet, and they can start to manipulate that data. And now I think in that same stage, using one of these AI chat agents to help them visualize and surface some of the data. So they get very proficient and they start to give this information to the organization. They might be in a department or they might be sharing it with the executive team, but the organization starts to rely on them. And then at that point, that might spread out. You might have other people that start to get more and more proficient with data, but it's very individual and very inconsistent and not centralized or controlled. And that's where you get into the situation of this person told me our metric says this, another person says that same metric is a different number. Which one's right? You also start to get people that feel overwhelmed because they're having to constantly now pull new data out and redo their spreadsheets. And it becomes this very manual, very heavy thing of whether you're presenting in a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, or whether you're trying to get a request done for somebody. It's kind of a painful situation for these people to be in. But there's so much value to the organization that they become very important to that. There's an important shift after that to start to automate some of that. And usually that means let's get a data warehouse in place and let's get these data feeds automated. So we can actually just get them in one place and we can access them. And at that point, more people can access them and it's centralized. But all the calculations are still manual. They're not curated or canonical, like blessed by the organization that this is the way we're going to calculate this particular KPI. So that's another shift. And usually that happens in a department. Usually department level metrics, these departments are really good about what they want to see and what they want to know. And they're pulling out of a single system, like sales might pull out of CRM. And so they've got that process down. But as soon as it crosses into multiple departments, like how many customers do we have? Is this customer active or not? Those are cross-cutting pieces of information that there's a shift there to get organizations to adopt canonical representations of metrics or dimensions or how they're measuring certain things. And then typically what we see is once that starts to happen and get some traction in a department, it's much easier to start to add other departments into the mix. And then from there, people may go into customer-facing analytics where they're actually sharing information out to their customers, better AI analysis where the AI is pointing to fresh, correct, data that it can rely on. I don't see it as stages. I just see it as kind of a spectrum of people maturing. And the story is pretty similar for most organizations.
Amazing. You have put in a very simplified way. This is the stage 1, 2, 3, and then these are the challenges they are getting that, okay, now we need the cross-department reporting. And earlier we were just pulling it directly from the CRM or different system. Now is the time to create the data warehouse. Now is the next steps, right? So amazing. I really like the thinking approach you have it and the things you shared. So a lot of companies, especially the mid-size, they need to do something with their data, but they don't know where to begin with. So what is the very first step they should take?
I will tell you where not to start and then where to start, because a lot of times companies say we need to do this, we need to get our data right. So they will start with, let's pull all the data out of our systems into a data lake or data warehouse. But the problem is that just starts to drag on. That's a much bigger effort than people might think. And that starts to drag on, and there's zero business value just doing things horizontally like that at that layer. So we talk about a data tier, take a slice. Like, what is, if there's a decision you're trying to make that you know the data is in your system, but it's just not available to you, or if there's a question you need answered and you know the data is in your somewhere in your databases, start there. And so when we work with a customer for the first time, we'll hold a roadmap workshop with them, and we'll just talk about questions and decisions. That's all we talk about. And that's pretty easy to make a list. So in a 30-minute or even hour-long brainstorming session with the right people in the room, don't worry about data. Don't worry about how do we get it out. Just think about, from a business perspective, what are you being held up on because you don't have good data, and make a list of questions. And I found questions are a lot easier for people to articulate than what metrics do you want. Sometimes that's harder to define, especially when you're first getting started. So just talking about what questions. I need to know which customers are about to churn. I know we have data in our product system, but I don't know how to answer that question. Those kind of questions. And so from there, you can make a list and you can prioritize a list. And that's very easy for anybody to do, regardless of how much proficiency they have with data or anything like that. So once you have that list, then you can pick one or two, and that's it, and focus on those one or two. And that's actually going to be a pretty heavy lift, because you now have to go connect to the system that has that data. But you define from the question, well, how are we going to answer it? What's the metric that we need? How do we calculate that metric or that KPI? How do we want to visualize it? And so all that's kind of top-down driven, but it's very focused. And then when you go to get the data out of the system to pull in, so from the bottom up, don't pull every table out of the database. Don't pull every endpoint from the API. Only pull what you need for that slice. And once you do that, you can do this in weeks and have your first one done. And then if you keep going down that approach of taking these top-down slices, that starts to accelerate and you start to get into the pattern. And it's very different from, let's pull all our data together and see what it says, and much more successful to do it that way.
Amazing. So when we were talking about different stages, so you mentioned that, okay, the first thing is about the spreadsheets, right? So they are copying the data from CSV to spreadsheets. So how they can move from spreadsheets to having the real insights that they can have the reliable data that they can trust. So how can shift can happen from 0 to 1?
That's a good place to start. It's a good framework to kind of align everybody around. And the effort should never be, let's replace spreadsheets. I think that's another maybe intuitive but wrong assumption of, we're going to get rid of spreadsheets and we're going to do it all through Power BI or whatever you settle on as your framework, because that's too big of a lift. You talk about going from 0 to 1. So in addition to just pick one or two questions to start with, don't even touch the spreadsheet process. Just say, for this metric, for this audience, and for this question, here's how we're going to do it. It's going to be centralized now. Another angle you could take on this is, throughout this process, we're going to move to automating data extractions and putting them into a warehouse. If you keep that focused, all right, we're just going to have this one or two metrics that's centralized through this process right now. The change management is a lot easier. You're not having to tell people, stop what you're doing, stop everything that's working, and shift everything. You're just taking it iteratively. And so even after you start pulling data and getting it into a warehouse that's centralized, and focusing on that one metric, you could even take from that point, have your people who are doing analysis in spreadsheets or in their own tools now start pointing to the data warehouse. It's a minor shift, and it actually takes some of the manual effort off their plate, so they could be more effective in their spreadsheet-driven analysis, which is really what they're trying to do. So the minimizing change management and kind of taking this incrementally is really a 0 to 1. And it's in contrast to a big project. How do I get all my data into the warehouse? How do I answer all my questions? How do I get people to stop using spreadsheets? I think those are the wrong questions, because that just is a lot of effort for hope that in the future things are going to be better, versus an iterative process is a much more successful route.
So during your consulting work, what has been the biggest challenges you have solved for your customers?
The biggest challenges for us are when you have many departments or divisions, or it might be private equity is buying companies that are on very different systems and very different processes. So that presents the two biggest challenges that we have are in that situation. One is, how do you align data from 7 different ERP systems into one canonical reporting model that's explorable and provides the controllers and accountants with analysis that they can do. The other is we're downstream from business process. So if the process isn't defined, the process isn't being followed, there's no way that the data is going to help manage that process or analyze that process. So the decisions you might want to make on data might require consistency in process upstream before you could ever hope to get anything out of it. And sometimes that's a really hard message and difficult for us too, because maybe we can't help in a particular situation until they fix the process. And so one example of that might be, I have customer records in CRM and I have customer records in ERP. How do I know those are the same customer? Well, if they have a consistent process in how we're recording that data, you can align those and marry those in the warehouse. And so the biggest challenges and the things that we've helped companies overcome that are maybe in the larger side of customers that we serve are, I have 3 or 7 ERPs and I've bought these companies and they're trying to integrate processes. So just being a good partner with them, by defining the report, for example, and them adopting the report and saying, this is how we're going to measure job progress on a construction site. This is how we measure it as a company. And then the pushing back upstream into the ERPs and into the project management processes and saying, what you're doing needs to align with how we're managing and reporting on the business. When you can get through that threshold, that's a huge win. Another one in that same situation is like if they're consolidating ERPs, just having an automatic way to move data from the old one to the new one, rather than having to download a CSV and manipulate it and upload it and hope it works. And these are like maybe mundane, but there are teams and people just wasting months just manually doing all of this stuff. And so for me, when we can get rid of that and let them do what they're good at, that's fulfilling to me when we can provide that kind of lift.
And how much time normally it takes to solve these kind of challenges when you are consolidating different systems together and then understanding and then giving it to the business? So how much time roughly it takes to implement these projects?
ERP migrations in $1 billion company can take more than a year. ERP migrations, when you're coming from 7 different companies, can take longer than that. For a smaller company, like on the low end, we serve companies that are doing $20 million in revenue. So for them, we actually have a product that's push button. So we push the button, we pull data out of the ERP, and they get pre-developed reports already ready to go. So a lot of times for the industries that we focus in, where we have these pre-built analytics, that could be a 24-hour turnaround, and we have all their data, and we have the data automatically coming in fresh every day or every hour, and they get a lot of value immediately. Past that, when they need to customize, or if they need to bring data together from other systems, you're looking at weeks to do that. When if there's custom logic you want to follow or custom way you just have to have something done. But in contrast, all of these projects used to take years because it was just so complicated. So the tooling has matured a lot, the process has matured a lot, and not having to build out the technical platform for every new customer also accelerates things quite a bit.
Amazing. So that's a great that people can, plug in their systems and get the reporting out of it. So this is the new, they reduce all the efforts of creating the pipelines, maintaining it, understanding it, and then data modeling, so all of these things. So that is how. So the other product you are mentioning about, so it also creates a data model underneath it, which can pull in the data and store it over there.
Isha, this is something I'm really excited about. So far we've talked about fairly technical ways of going about data management, but with this new product, there are certain industries. Construction is one that we're really focused on. There's a pretty standard way of doing business, and there's a certain number of ERPs and project management systems that are just out on the market. But there's no ontology. There's no shared understanding of this is exactly how we define our industry. But if you had one, you could do a lot of things. So we've developed this. We call it the unified data model. So whatever your ERP is, we map it to the unified data model. It doesn't matter which ERP you're using in your business. And once we do that, we can have things like pre-built dashboards that are already ready to go. AI analyst agents that are pre-trained on the data model and actually know what it means. And so it's not a project anymore at that point. If you can map these things into a predefined reporting model or data model like this, then the things you can build on top of it are very reusable because it no longer matters what your underlying data or your underlying systems how they stored data.
And you can get the insights right away because you just need to map it as per the data model, and you can get the insights, pre-built dashboards that you can start it from day one. And if you need additional reporting, you can add it on the top of it. Amazing. So how, in your experience, that data has really helped businesses to take decisions, and how companies have actually utilized it?
There comes a point in a construction company's life cycle where there's too much going on for anybody to keep it in their head. And these leaders in these construction companies, most of them grew up in the business, or maybe they're second generation, so they have so much exposure. They know how it's supposed to run, and they can keep a ton in their head. But at some point, they have to start to systematize, and they do. They buy an ERP, they buy a project management system, they might even buy a CRM, and the business keeps growing. And if they know what to focus on, they know how to manage and they know how to lead through any kind of situation. But it becomes too big of an operation and too many different things going on. So some of the most useful things that our customers have found are just, are any of my metrics out of line? What's my punch list of, like, here are the 3 or 4 things that are trending bad or are out of kind of the boundaries or thresholds that we've set? I need to dig into those. And so rather than just look at dashboards, they're focused on a few key questions that they're trying to answer, drilling in and figuring out exactly what's going on so they can go then manage that situation. The other is notifications in that kind of situation. So rather than coming and seeing something, just being notified via email or text or whatever to say, here's a situation where you should take a look. And things like, here's your top 5 best performing projects last week. Here's your bottom 5 worst performing projects like last week. And seeing all that visually and seeing it in one place and just being able to pinpoint. Once people have the information, they know what to do and they know how to handle it. But it's just when there's too much going on and the data isn't clear and visual and immediately recognizable, it's impossible to know where to focus time. But once they have it, they can focus their time.
Absolutely. Do you want to share a project which didn't went well? What was the challenges and what should be the approach you thought that you should have taken?
A lot of times when things don't go well, it's really just around expectations. So where we've struggled in the past is being overly confident in connecting to a system that we've never connected to before, or being overly optimistic about the vendor of a particular system giving us access that we need to be able to get the data out. Other things that have been difficult are sometimes data is very large. And this really isn't applicable to most of our customers, but if you have tens or hundreds of terabytes of data, sometimes you just need a lot more and different techniques to address that data. So what we found is when there's new systems, we have a different procedure to say before we really get going full tilt with your organization, we're going to do some POCs around this system. We're going to make sure that we can get that data out. And then the other approach that's been very helpful, whether it's a bottoms up or a top down kind of situation, having kind of templated workshops depending on the situation. So depending on what type of data asset or what kind of thing we're working on for the customer at the moment, having a workshop that's templated and it's a working session and we're getting all the information we need up front out of people very consistently, that helps a ton. Rather than just meeting and talking through things and hoping that we get the information that we need, we have a very prescribed approach to get information out. So data's tough. I mean, it's big and wide and complicated, but these structured approaches and specific ways of dealing with some of the risks around it have been very helpful.
You're right. Like, we have to be 100% sure before doing anything. So POCs are the things where we can evaluate what is working, what is not working. Are we overcommitting? Are we undercommitting? So that can give a lot of different perspective, and then we can have a working sessions around it and talking more, and then scale that proof of concepts further. It was really good discussion. Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing your insights, your practical experiences. You have shared what to do and what not to do. What is the different stages of data and how we can move it from one stage to another. So we talk about spreadsheets to different the next level of stage, how they can achieve it. Amazing insights. I really loved it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Isha. Good to talk with you.